There he is.
Hey, Brian.
Hello.
Hi.
Perfect. I believe we're good to go. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started.
There he is.
Hey, Brian. Let's make sure.
Hello.
Perfect.
Hi.
My name is Michael Robinson. I'm with the Houston.
Perfect.
I believe.
Uh-oh.
We're good to go. Perfect. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started.
There he is.
Realizing what is.
Oh, someone has their speakers
Sorry.
way loud.
I had my audio also on, so I thought someone was talking, and it was just my delayed voice. So my name is Mike Robinson. I'm with the Houston Cinema Art Society, and we are really proud to partner with Swamp and with the Houston Film Commission to present the Houston Film Commission's Retro Showcase of these 4 fantastic films ranging from 1996 to 1999, and including filmmakers Peter Lucas, Cassandra Thibodeau, Brian Huberman, and also Joe Grisafi. They'll all be talking about their work, and it will be moderated by Alfred Cervantes of the Houston Film Commission. So thank you all so much for joining us. And then Alfred, if you want to kick it off.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate everyone being here and Houston Cinema Arts for reaching out and asking us to put together a collection of our past films from our past Texas Filmmaker Showcase. And this is, we decided to do a retro showcase, or you can also call it a classic showcase of films between selected from 1996 to 1999. These films are fantastic. I watched the collection and it just brought a smile to my face because there's something for everyone. They were all shot on film. And so it's truly a Texas Filmmaker Showcase. But they're all a bit different and something for everyone. And so what we're going to do tonight is hopefully people have had a chance to watch the collection, and we're going to speak with the filmmakers about the films kind of Q&A fashion and go down the line. Before we get started, I would like to thank, again, Houston Cinema Arts. I'd like to thank Southwest Alternate Media Project and the Houston Film Commission, whose program the Texas Filmmakers Showcase is, that we put together every year. And of course, especially like to thank the filmmakers that are a part of the collection and able to join us on Zoom tonight. So this virtual Q&A. Michael, we're all learning here technically, so it may not be perfect, but we're all here and that's what matters. So thank you so much. The 4 films between 1996 and 1999, the Texas Filmmaker Showcase was started as a student film contest early on in the early 90s, and then it morphed into just an independent showcase for independent filmmakers. And so some of these were student films, but some of them are just standalone independent short films by Texas filmmakers. The common theme being that they're all Texas filmmakers. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna chat real briefly about each filmmaker in order that the films were presented. And then I'm gonna ask the filmmakers a couple questions each, but this is supposed to be an interactive event. And so any viewers are welcome to ask their questions. I believe there's a chat box. So if you hover, move your mouse and hover over the bottom of the screen, there's a little chat box, which I just turned on myself. And you can type questions into the chat box and we will answer questions from viewers. And that's hopefully a big part of what we're doing here tonight. So Joe Grisafi, his film was up first, a comedy called Death and a Salesman from 1996. This was, as I was watching the films tonight, I know that this particular film was shot at a car lot on Washington Avenue. That is no longer there, I believe. So another film was also shot off of Washington Avenue, the blues film at the end of this. But Joe Grisafi has been working in film for a long, long time, and is primarily known, well, he's known for a lot of things. He's a filmmaker, he's a casting director, also on many, many films. He has a website called southwestcasting.com. So if anyone, I've repeated that website many times, if anyone is interested in being an extra or background talent in a film, you can go to his website, southwestcasting.com, register to get on his email list, and you will be kept posted on opportunities to be an extra on films in the greater Houston area. It's always been a great service Joe has done. And so I wanted to share that. And so we're going to talk about his films. We're going to come back to you, Joe. I'm going to real briefly talk about Peter Lucas. Peter's film also, there you go, from 1997, Now Here. Peter, as you saw in the film, the soundtrack is fantastic, a jazz soundtrack, and Peter is a kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? Expert on music. There's a word for that, but he has always been interested in experimental film. He works at Aurora Picture Show, which their mission is to screen short, non-commercial film work. But what he's been doing lately is curating amazing music on the website glasstire.org, the Texas Arts website. And so if you have not heard the mixtapes from glasstire.org, there's now 6 of them. So go to that website, glasstire.org, and look for the mixtapes they've been doing, curated by Peter Lucas and some other local musicians as well. Cassandra Thibodeau is a filmmaker. I don't have to say y'all been filmmakers for a long time, because everyone here has, all of y'all have for a long time. So Cassandra's, this film that you saw, 3 Minutes on a Bus, was a student film of hers from UT. And that year, 1997, we
Columbia.
Oh, Columbia, I'm sorry. But we showed 2 short films by Cassandra that year in 1997, 3 Minutes on a Bus, and another short film called R&R that's happened very infrequently, where the same filmmaker had 2 shorts in the same year. So they're both standout films, and Cassandra is probably well known here in Houston as the proprietor of the Microcinema 14 Pews. And so the Microcinema in the Heights, 14pews.org, the numbers 14pews.org. If you haven't been there, hopefully when people are able to visit in person, you can go by there and enjoy seeing a film in person at the Church of Cinema in the Heights. So, and then Brian Huberman. Brian, there you are. Brian's in his office there at Rice University. So Brian has been with the at Rice University for a while, quite a while, and
about
the
1,000 years, about
1,000 years. I was going to guesstimate, but it's about right around 1,000 years. And in the Department of Visual and Dramatic Arts there. What's special about Rice? Many things, of course. They have the Rice Cinema on campus, where they have been showing also retro screenings from their archives. But this year was special, which was interrupted by the what's going on right now. This was the 50th anniversary year of the department, and they had a lot of things planned, which are now many of them virtual.
Well, I should say at this point that Tish Stringer, who is our film person here, really the passionate one, is continuing our screenings on Thursday nights online.
Yes.
The
yes,
lo-fi, the so-called lo-fi series. So
there you go. And that's
still,
tomorrow.
we have not gone dark, not completely dark.
That's right. And the website for that is vada.rice.edu. So if anyone wants to check that out, they do have the schedule on there. They've been keeping that frequent and posted on there. So so let's go back to the top. Joe, I want to ask you, and I'm going to ask each filmmaker the films that we saw in the collection. Joe, where did the idea come from, and what spurred you to make that film? Of course, I've known you for a long time, and I know comedy's your bag, and so but go ahead and tell us the beginnings of that film.
Well, I had my friend Lonnie Reeves and I had been brainstorming script ideas, and we had been throwing around feature-length ideas, and then suddenly we realized we needed to do a short to actually do something. And he, at one of our meetings, he just said, what if the Grim Reaper comes to get a car salesman? And then I said, oh, death and a salesman. And then we just riffed back and forth. And by the end of the evening, we had what was almost the final draft of the script.
Mhm.
So it was like a day to write that.
Gotcha. And then you the filmmaking, because we showed it in our showcase at that time. Of course, everyone was shooting on film, acquiring on film. But how was the process? I mean, you found that car lot. Were they agreeable right away? Did you have a hard time making it, or what
It
happened?
was, you know, I feel like my first film, short or feature, my first film should have been much more difficult to make. But I had interned at David Berman Films in college, and Jim Barham, who you know, was one of the directors and cinematographers there. And when I had the idea, when we had the script, we approached him to shoot it, and he agreed to shoot it. So that was a big feather in our cap, a big thing out of the way. And then we were scouting for a location, and we went straight to the Heights looking, because there's still a lot of car lots there now.
Mhm.
But we stumbled across Scheffler Motors on Washington, which was absolutely perfect with the little wooden building and the open lot. And it felt like it was, even though it was surrounded by things, it felt kind of isolated. And went inside and approached Gene Scheffler, the guy that owned it, just cold. And he agreed to do it. He agreed. And then later that day said, you know, I know your dad, because my dad's in the car business, or at the time was, and they knew each other. And I called my dad and said, hey, we're going to do this thing at Gene Scheffler's place. Oh, Gene. Yeah, I know Gene. So that worked out beautifully. And as far as the practical effects go, I met Bruce Turner at a little model show and pitched the idea to him, and said he had all his little models that he built, that he molded and sculpted himself, out on his table. And I said, I want to do this little short film. Will you help us build the bones?
Mhm.
And he jumped on it too. So all these people are telling me yes right out of the gate, when we're supposed to be used to hearing no, you know?
And he built the foot, I guess, that fell apart when the Grim Reaper kicked the tire.
Yes, he built the hand that was supposed, it was a functioning hand. We just didn't have the means to actually make it work on the day. But yes, he built the foot. Not only did he build it to fall apart, he numbered it carefully to put back together. We did that take twice, and he was able to reassemble it in like 15 minutes.
Good. That's
And
great. Experienced
yeah.
model maker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I still don't understand why people actually kicked tires when you're looking at a car. Does anybody know that? I have no idea.
I don't know either.
I mean, like it's gonna fall off or something. I don't know.
Right.
But-
And another happy accident with the car lot was at the time was O.J. Simpson. The O.J. Simpson trial was going on, so the white Bronco was a big deal.
right.
And he happened to have a white Bronco on the lot.
That's amazing.
So we wrote that into the script. That wasn't originally part of it.
Gotcha. That's amazing. I know, again, because I've known you for so long, your car was in the film. Is that?
I was driving that little red Miata at the time.
Yeah.
And we had to get that the final car towed there because it didn't run.
Oh.
And then
Pinto?
we had to we had to tow the hearse there.
Okay.
We had to tow the hearse there, and the other car didn't run either. So that was just pushed. But the other car belonged there.
Gotcha.
But the hearse had to get towed to and from.
Well, it's a funny little script, and I can see how y'all went back and forth with it and everything. You know what's funny to me is watching it and him trying to dial. I mean, you know, it's kind of funny. The rotary phones, dialing 911 on a rotary phone. It's I'm just convinced I'm gonna have a heart attack. I'm just glad I have a cell phone now, and not
They
a
wouldn't know
rotary
where to find you on your cell phone now, though.
phone. So okay, I have more questions for you, but we're gonna come back. So
Okay.
Peter, I would like to know, so Peter, your film Now Here, as I mentioned before, an experimental film with a great soundtrack, kind of a little bit of a skating movie, is a skating film too. I know that's kind of its own genre as well, but tell us how the idea came to you and how you would describe it.
I don't think it qualifies as a skating film.
Okay.
Okay, so it's a little bit hard to talk about, and sometimes annoying to talk about experimental films. But basically, I'm from Houston, born and raised here. At the time, I was living in New York City, but coming back and forth between New York and Texas a lot. So I was kind of existing between these two very different environments. And so the very basic idea for the film was to kind of create these two different worlds, these two different kind of dream film things, and then pull them together. So one in Texas and one in New York. So I shot all color Super 8 film in Texas, and all black and white 16 millimeter in New York, and added these sort of color tints to them. So they would be very kind of aesthetically different, and try to kind of play with the physical differences and just the kind of things that I thought about, sort of the vibe, the difference in kind of activity and energy in those two different areas. And then kind of have just a figure kind of going through them as if they're sort of two different realities, two different dreams, or kind of a sort of concurrent dreams or something like that. Yeah, and then, yeah, I don't know how much, there's a lot in there at the time. I was thinking a lot about the sort of language and nature of dreams and memories and how that related to film, video, photography, sound, collage, and all of that stuff. So
I have a question. How did you decide to make Houston Super 8 and New York 16 millimeter?
Yeah, I just, I kind of, in a way, I sort of thought that made sense to me, that Houston and Texas, it's maybe more of a personal connotation too, but that it had more color and more of a kind of organic feel and a little bit sort of grittier. But maybe also that I felt like Texas was home, and Super 8 is kind of feels like home movies, or a little bit like the past in a way. So
was there some West Texas in there as well? Or
there's a little bit of Central Texas in there.
Texas,
So
okay.
it was in Houston and a little bit west.
Okay, gotcha. Because the kind of the cliffs or the rocks that they're on.
Oh yeah, that was actually at Enchanted Rock.
Oh, okay.
That's as far out of Houston as that got.
Yeah, I wondered whether, because you thought New York was a more of an aristocratic and serious environment, and black and white 16 millimeter.
I don't think I had the kind of socio-cultural, political connotation as much as sharper edges. A lot more stuff and a lot of sharp edges and angles, as opposed to Texas being kind of skies and hues and textures.
Well, I usually think of New York as sensory overload, really. So
sensory overload.
Sensory overload. Yes.
I think of New York as this sort of animal, this terrible beast. If you've ever looked at the streets on the Lower East Side, there are these undulating, it's crippled and in agony, and they have these huge metal strips bolted down, sort of like a Frankenstein covering, and it's like some terrible monster is trying to bust out kind of through the concrete of the. I think of it as a caged animal, a beast, a monster.
It kind of is, yeah. For sure.
Texas is also a beast.
A different kind of beast, right?
I know, but it's so much younger, and I don't think of it as I know it. There are big cities here, but for some reason, when you say Texas and New York, I immediately think of Texas as a rural place. Maybe I'm just thinking in opposites.
Well, Peter,
and it's so young and naive in comparison. That's how I thought the Super 8 you chose, because it's it's interesting, like your home movie.
Yeah, Houston. Even though Houston is very technically a huge city, but it feels much more rural and horizontal and open. And there's much more kind of greenery and space, open space.
Well, one place you shot was Columbus, Texas. There was the scene in there with the motel, right? That was Columbus, Texas, right? So about an hour west of Houston, where there's definitely much more space.
I'm fairly sure that motel's not there anymore, although I have no idea.
Probably not.
It was meticulously chosen by the fact that we were tired of driving and pulled over. And it seemed to be perfect. There was a lot of stuff like that that actually I was trying to kind of embrace the actual experience. So a lot of things I would kind of plan some things, but I'll allow myself to kind of shoot along the way and let the film form during the process of it.
Well, that was part of the trip down memory lane thing. That was a great motel scene in your film. So you're right. It's a classic motel. But a big part of your film is the music. Can you talk about the music a little bit?
Yeah. So I was doing a lot of kind of the sound collage and loops and sort of experimental stuff. And then I also had some collaborations with some great musicians. There's a violinist, Zach Carrington, who's originally from Houston. I went to HSPVA and he was at PVA with me, and also a pianist and arranger who I'd done a lot of music with, Eddie Hobesall. So I had some collaborations in there. The kind of more traditional music that's in there is all original stuff, but collaborations with them. And then a lot of it was actual kind of weird sound collage and samples and layering of ambiences and little bits of films in there too, film and TV. Yeah, that was the kind of, it was a trip for me to start thinking about this stuff because, it was all analog, and that film was, I edited on video, but linear video. So just as I went, and I think, with two tracks of sound. So I was kind of preparing a lot of different layers of sound beforehand, but then when I was actually editing, it was just 2 tracks, and linear as you go editing, and never, that project never touched a computer. And it's just kind of crazy for me to think,
right,
about how painstaking that was. But I think it changes the nature of how you make a film if you really have to make a decision like that cannot be undone.
Right.
But there's a little pain and trauma in remembering that process. But I'm also kind of proud of, like, oh yeah, but we used to actually, it's like painting. When you make a mark, that mark is there. Right.
Does make you think more about your film, that's for sure. So I have more questions for you, but we're going to go next to Cassandra real quick. Cassandra, your film, 3 Minutes on a Bus. As I mentioned, one of the 2 films of yours we showed that year, but if you could tell us, right at the beginning of your film, it says based on a true story. So, so tell us about that.
I also went to HSPVA, and my mom worked downtown, and sometimes I'd go downtown and then we'd ride the bus home. And so it was just an event that happened on the bus in 1982, heading, I guess it was along West Gray maybe, and headed into Montrose. I forget the bus line or whatever. But so it was just an event that happened where, and it was a longer situation where the guy who got off the bus to try and help the woman who was having a child and her daughter, he got back on the bus, and we took a vote if the bus was to detour to the hospital, right? But it just, so my first draft was like 7 minutes on a bus. But then I decided that really what it was about was really just sort of this idea of a young girl seeing what I guess having a child, like you have this romantic notion of birth, but yet at the end, I mean, this woman collapsed in the field and she went into labor, and that's where anyway, it was very, I wanted to really just focus on a young girl's first experience of this unusual experience of birth, in a sense. So.
Well, that's witnessing something that will stick with you for sure. I mean, experience like that.
And so I didn't really get into sort of like the voting and people saying, yelling at the bus driver because the AC wasn't working and we were just hot. and just, and then he said something like insurance, he can't go away from the approved route, and everyone had their reasoning, about why they wanted either for her to go to the hospital or not. And then at the end of the day, the guy got off the bus and stuff. So and
Wow.
it continues. It went on, but yeah.
Right.
So,
You kept moving your hands. Did y'all do rock, paper, scissors to determine? Is it?
I know. That was a suggestion, but then we did a vote against it.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, it is a powerful story, as was the other one you had that year, R&R, about a soldier returning on leave to find out that his buddy had been killed. But this one, it's a snippet, like you said, of a little bit bigger story, but we get the gist of the story is the bus was not helping this woman.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I thought was just stylistically interesting is in the beginning, it was all done on sticks, right, on a tripod, until the moment when that guy gets up, and then we go to handheld. And Lee Daniel, who shot Slacker, David, and Confused, Before Sunrise, he was the DP, he was the camera person and shot this. And what happened is this huge storm blew in, and we had about 25 minutes to finish the other half of the film. And so I almost felt like he was having a Vietnam flashback. He's like, everyone down, like the crew, and he just went on hand, and it went handheld from there. It was kind of interesting. I tried to go with it, like, wow. And then the storm came in, and I was very grateful that we went to handheld right then, because that was the only day I had everyone, for this. It was probably about a 7-hour shoot that went to like 3.5 hours, because of the storm. Yeah.
Gotcha. Just a one-day shoot though. And
just
just one day shoot.
Yeah.
And you don't remember, was it an actual city bus or did you get a different bus?
I rented a bus, and this bus was actually like a 1960s something bus. I thought it was interesting that, the back seats are all hard for where, African Americans would sit, or it seemed like it was designed for, I don't know, that's what I was told. That's what I was told. And I thought that that was the only bus I could rent for the money I had. And so I was told that buses, designed 40s, 50s, 60s, that all the back seats would have no padding, and stuff. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And so that was. So it was, I rented that bus.
Gotcha. And this was before Craigslist, so you couldn't just go on Craigslist and get a bus or something.
Yes, this was actually, I think it was shot in '95, because then Lee had to leave that night and fly out to Vienna to shoot Before Sunrise.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Wow. Yeah. Gotcha. And what about casting? Do you remember anything about the casting of the film?
The casting was, what happened is I couldn't find who I was looking for. It just was terrible, the casting. And so a night or two, I went to TK Betterman's. It was a bar a block away from where I lived.
It's still there.
And Eagle Purnell was always at the end of the bar. And so I knew Eagle could help me, and I knew he'd be at the bar. And so I went in, and he's the one that cast the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
Those are all his people. That he knew, and I called them from the payphone, and it was like, it was magic. So it was great to, and what happened is, I guess everyone in that cast, like, it was the first time I got to work with Scott Szabo on sound, but everyone was off that day, most likely because of the storm. Right. So things were pushed up because I could only get this crew for one, for this, day. And I couldn't find the cast. and Lee was leaving the next day. So I was like, let's do it. And that's why I went into TK Bitterman and asked Eagle.
Gotcha. And he fixed the problem. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah, it was amazing.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And that's a good segue, Eagle Pinnell, over to Brian. So Brian, Brian's, one of his credits is cameraman for Last Night at the Alamo, directed by Eagle Pinnell,
Wow.
which is a seminal Houston movie. But also he was the cameraman, Brian, on the Third Ward Blues by the late Heather Korb. So we're sad that she's not with us any longer, but her film and your film, Third Ward Blues, is just I mean, it's a special film because it's a time capsule into really some legendary Houston blues musicians. Brian, if you could, tell us about Heather a little bit and about the film.
Excuse me. Yeah, it is a shame that she would love to be here in the Brady Bunch with all of you, I'm sure. And
Yeah.
and this film she described as her baby. She didn't have any real babies, but this was her real baby. And I guess she conceived of this idea when she was living in France, I think in Paris, she told me. This is sometime in the mid-90s. And so she came back to Houston to, Alfred, you've disappeared. That's very distracting.
There we go.
I don't know why, but I kind of locked onto you as
I was just having a
someone
drink
to
of water.
talk to, and this is very kind of, I know I should be more proficient with Zoom, but it's still a foreign thing to me. So
sure.
You're committed. You have to stay on. Anyway, so she came back to Houston and came to the Rice Media Center where I work with the idea of joining a class, I think auditing a class, and it's all part of her preparation for making this film that became Third Ward Blues. So that's how I first encountered her. And so I guess my first role was some type of instructor talking about filmmaking. And then I became involved in the actual production of it. And I also edited the film. So, I have, a close connection with the piece. And she, her role really was, in TV terms, I think, as the creative producer. I mean, what she, it was amazing to me that she put together all these exotic locations, these juke joints, I guess they're called, and got access to them. And then beyond that, access to these special performers like Johnny Clyde Copeland and Albert Collins, Gatemouth, the amazing Gatemouth Brown, is that it?
Yep.
I've not done my homework. I mean, this is a long time ago. We filmed and edited this, and Joe Guitar Hughes, and I'm sure hope I'm not missing anybody there in that. So these were amazingly colorful characters, but they're also important characters on the Houston blues scene. And how she got the connections with these people, I have no idea. All I know is that we would arrive in these crazy places and it would be seamless. We would just sort of assimilate ourselves into, to me, very foreign environments. I'm not, I don't tend to make a habit of kind of getting involved in the Houston blues scene, and I certainly haven't been. So it was definitely a foreign experience to me. But I mean, it was an exciting film experience, and it was film, as you pointed out. I hadn't realized that all of us had made films, and that makes us an elite crowd, you realize. this. I mean, I don't mind
That's
saying
right.
that. Because, you know, any idiot can go out with their cell phone and shoot something that looks halfway, you know, the technology, you know, here we go. You know,
Right.
when I started doing this stuff, you know, there weren't cell phones, and there wasn't videotape either. It was a challenging business making a film, because it involved money. First of all, just money. There's no just screwing around and trying things out as you can with a video camera.
It takes a certain kind of idiot to do it on film.
Absolutely. I mean, an idiot worth spending time with, you know, an interesting.
Well, as Peter said earlier, you have to think more about your everything, really.
Well,
What you're
that's, you
capturing and
see,
your planning
Heather
and everything.
raised this money herself. She didn't get a grant. There was no kind of industrial backing for it. She just had, I think, a fairly good job at that time, a good day job, you know, and she put her money into this. And, you know, Christ, you know, every roll of film, every 400-foot load is sort of like the cash register is dinging. And
well, in the credits of the film, it's credited as being finished in, or at least on the film, 1996. Although we did not screen it in our showcase until 1999. So how long were you involved, or how long did it take to make the?
Well,
were you involved?
Made sort of rough and tumble over a period of time. Like she could raise a bit more money, buy a couple of more rolls of film, and here we go again. You know, it's over 20 years ago. I mean, certain things I don't put away, I don't file away for quick retrieval. And I know it was made over several months.
Gotcha.
I don't know, 3 or 4 months, something like that. And and then the editing, you know, editing, pain in the ass, you know, it's particularly when, you know, the equipment is, you know, interesting, you know, so it was not a smooth process. It was a trial at every stage, and the shooting stage, I was going to say, was problematic because we had so little film. So shooting it, I mean, you really did have to, I suppose, cutting the camera. I mean, that was, you had to be thinking in those terms. Which I mean, I think it worked out okay. I mean, but it was just something to adjust to. Something that contemporary filmmakers couldn't do. They couldn't do this.
Well,
they don't have the skills. They don't have the temperament to contain themselves and to think ahead like that.
Right.
You know.
Hey, Brian, I was going to ask you about the premiere of that film. Did that premiere at the Rice Media Center there, or?
I really don't remember. I'd like to think it did, but.
Well, any questions I asked this evening, everyone gets a pass. You can also say I don't remember because they were all so long ago. So everyone gets a pass.
I get the thing I would like to say is in editing the piece is that the things that I remember from it were all the behind the scenes stuff that you know, that Heather allowed me to exploit. In the end, for example, there's a scene at, is it Rockefeller's? We were there one night, and that was Albert Collins. That was his night, and he has this real deal of going out into the audience, or had, and with his guitar. It was a big performance and so forth. So we were obviously going to get that. That was a plan. But what wasn't planned, I mean, I hadn't anticipated it because I don't know anything about blues clubs and people, is the tune-up session. And that, you know, because when you buy a record or a CD or whatever, you know, you get the finished piece and it's done. But when you go to a club like that with these characters, I mean, it's off the cuff, and other musicians are joining them. It's a very creative, special kind of moment. And, you know, there's, you know, we've got to get our instruments all together, but they didn't just kind of tune it in some kind of cold scientific fashion. It
Yeah.
actually became part of the performance. And one by one, they would kind of join in, and there would be this sort of evolving sort of piece of music would come out of just this act of them getting into tune. And I was able to, despite the fact we didn't have enough footage, I just shot that. Some of
Well,
that.
if y'all ever show that on the Thursday nights at Rice, let me know, or let us know the outtakes from that film. That would be.
Oh, no, the outtake is in the film.
Yeah.
Oh, it is in the film. Okay,
It's
okay,
in
gotcha.
the film. No,
Well-
that's the whole point. No,
Oh, gotcha,
normally
gotcha.
all that stuff is out.
Well,
but we
in
were
that,
I
in
thought
that-
that was much more interesting, that
Gotcha.
material.
Well-
That's what I tried to
well,
get.
in that same scene with Albert Collins at Rockefellers, as you walk with him towards the front of the stage, there's a very young Carolyn Wonderland in the audience, right beside the stage,
Who?
watching also. Carolyn Wonderland, she's a musician from Houston, now lives in Austin, but she.
HSPVA as well.
Oh, really?
Is that right? Okay, I
Yeah.
didn't
Well,
know that.
that's the
Yeah.
great thing about film, is that these inadvertent things, and it's not just film, it's photography too. You know, it's those things that you capture along that you totally unawares of.
Yeah.
So
There's
that's very
probably a
exciting.
lot of people in that club.
Yeah.
I was curious so you had to deal with sync sound, which I didn't have to do so much. But there's a lot of great music recorded for the film. Were you guys recording stuff just on like a Nagra or?
Yeah, we had a Nagra. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was just rough and tumble. I mean,
Yeah.
I should recognize Phil Davis, our late engineer here at the Media Center. Everyone's dead now. God.
Not everyone.
No,
Exactly.
that's right.
Not everyone. Yes.
Not everyone.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be so inclusive.
Yourself.
I'm going to jump back to Joe real quick because I want to go down the panel one more time. And Joe, tell us super briefly what you've been doing since 1996. I'm just kidding.
Super briefly.
That's-
Well,
I'm just kidding. You made so many short films, and
actually, I've only made a few short films. I jumped
okay.
right.
Well, you made a lot of films, and a lot of them are on Amazon. So go tell us about your films we can see and where they are and all that.
Well, if you go to starshipfilms.com, there's
Oh,
links.
it's
to
backward.
everything.
It's backwards
But
here.
right after Death and a Salesman, I jumped right into features. I didn't
Yeah.
do another short like other people think I should have. So I jumped right into a feature. Really enjoyed that process, and then got lost in marketing it. Just the time-consuming marketing camp. So then I did Dead of Night. Then I did Lars the Emo Kid, which I think is my best one. And then we did this one here called Conjoined on not quite a dare, but it was a challenge to make a feature film for under $2,000. And it was going to be distributed, whether it was good or bad. That was the thing. Bob Willems, Bob Willems, he was going to launch a horror channel on Roku, and he said he needed content, and he didn't care how good or bad it was. And I said, I could make you a bad movie. So we used his studio, shot this thing in 9 days for $1,850, and it played film festivals for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
5 years.
Right.
And then the most recent short, I did not direct, but I wrote and I star in it, is this one right here, Joe Returns a Video, which has won multiple awards and is also on Amazon now.
Yeah. Yeah. So still active filmmaker, making things or in things, and both writing things and doing everything. So your website is backwards on my screen, starshipfilms.com.
Starshipfilms.com. It's normal on my screen. Maybe I should keep it. Okay.
Oh, all your titles are reversed on
I'm
my
gonna fix that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
we're
gonna.
all learning here. There you go. Okay. Peter, tell us what you're up to now. We mentioned Glass Tire, but tell us what you're working on. And also, you've worked at the Contemporary Arts Museum, and also you're on board with Aurora Picture Show. So tell us that as well.
Yeah. So over the last 20 something years. All right, I'll go year by year. No, I'm doing I'm still making art in various forms. I'm making some film and video stuff, some installation and collage, and a little bit of sound and music. Less of my own stuff now, just really kind of when I have the chance to. And I work in the arts. I work with Aurora Picture Show, doing in Houston, doing experimental, all kinds of experimental film, video, and live cinema there, and working with the Museum of Fine Arts, and writing a bit for Glass Tire. And it's been, it's been interesting. I'm not sure. I don't want to plug everything or sell anything, but a couple of things were occurring to me. But there are a lot of people during the kind of quarantine that have been digging, have had time on their hands and been digging through photos and thinking about their lives and stuff. Mm-hmm. I've been busy enough not to necessarily go down that rabbit hole until you called and made me think about this film and where my life was at that time and everything.
We're here to help.
So a couple of things occur to me that that I'm remembering. First of all, Swamp, co-presenter of this program, some of the Super 8 stuff that I shot was on a camera that I borrowed from Swamp. Mm-hmm. They were always great and just sort of ridiculously helpful a number of times in my kind of young career that I would have not been things would not have been so easy if they weren't so cool and just be like, yeah, sure, take the camera as long as you need. And I also edited this version. I had another version of this film, but I edited this version on Swamp equipment, on video editing equipment. And I was remembering that, I'll try not to make this too long, but no one's listening to this Q&A, are they? Do we have public viewers? Okay, so Swamp said, oh, sure. I think it was Celia at the time. But I said, can I come over and use the editing equipment? They said, well, of course you can, but it's at this guy's house. Maybe you can get it from him or go over to his house. I'm like, okay. This guy, I said, hey, can I have it? And he said, well, it's at my place. You just want to come over. And I spent maybe a couple of weeks going, I think every day to his house. Guy in the Heights, kind of a cluttered space. He was an eclectic kind of weirdo, but that was right up my alley. I'm not quite sure why he put up with me in his living room, but I was editing this version and I was editing and re-editing another thing, and he would be like in a bathrobe and have coffee and kind of pass by every once in a while. And then one day he liked what he saw me doing and we were talking and he was like, I'm Banjo Man. So it turns out to be Frank Davis. And I'm not sure if anybody knows who Frank is, but yeah. So I said, what the fuck is Banjo Man? And he brought out his homemade electric banjo that he'd made in the 60s and showed me. I thought it was the coolest thing. And it's such a Houston moment for me to be editing this film in that guy's house in the Heights, just because Swamp was like, well, look, this guy has it or whatever. I mean, that whole thing, that kind of organic thing.
That's amazing. Yeah.
To all of these little weird pieces that have helped me be creative and it was like a movie, except for I loved how kind of nonchalant all of that was.
That's great.
So anyway, all these connections and Brian, you had something to do with Swamp, right?
I'm a founder member of it.
That's right.
There you go.
As did Eagle.
Well, no, the founders were Ed Hugetts, James Blue, and myself.
Right.
That goes back to 1977, I think.
Yeah, that's when it was founded. Yep.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Well, Peter, glad they were able to help, and Swamp is still trying to help filmmakers. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, I know you said you're not going to.
We have.
It's okay. We're going to cut this part out. It's all right. I know you said you don't want to promote yourself, but again, I encourage viewers to visit glasstire.org and listen to some fantastic music that has been curated over the last 6 weeks. It will do your soul some good. So thank you for that, Peter. So Cassandra, what have you been working on? Peter just mentioned that a lot of people have been visiting past films and everything. I know that you put some of your films online for people to enjoy. So tell us about that and what you're up to now.
And first of all, I wanted to say that Swamp also gave me my first grant to do that film, 3 minutes on the bus. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to pay, I couldn't have finished that film without the $500. It was, so I was very grateful to Swamp. They were there at the very beginning. So
Excellent.
Lately I've been editing some films. Well, I have a couple of films in the last 6 months that have been, what's weird is this 1 month, I've had more films in just small film festivals than I've ever had. They're all though live streaming. So it's a 63-minute documentary called Theremin Fever. So that has played in 3 film festivals. Then there's the Jesse Lott Art and Activism that has played, but that has played for the last year. And then there's a short documentary on the Minols that recently played Thin Line in Denton, Thin Line Festival. And that was, I guess, 6 weeks ago. So it's kind of funny that, during this moment that, but I feel grateful that they have been streaming, the festivals have been actively keeping the arts alive by doing just what you're doing right now, So lately I have 3 documentaries that I'm working on. So about the Nikki Araguz Lloyd, right? So I've followed this transgender activist since late 2010, 2011. For 6 years, I followed her for her court case. And then 2 years, then she won the court case. But anyway, and then, 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, she died of an overdose, and so I'm sort of grappling with when I want to finish a project, but my subject has now OD, on heroin. And so how do I restructure that? So how do I address that? Because she talks about, things that reflect exactly what happened in the documentary. And beforehand, I was editing that all out, her attempts of suicide, her drug addiction. But now I'm thinking maybe that is part of the documentary. So that's what I'm working on, is sort of, that big project. And then this one called Muttcracker Suite. So it's about 2 brothers, Darren, who's a circus performer, and his brother James, who has Down syndrome. And James takes care of the dogs. And each year they do this performance called the Muttcracker with dogs. So it's a Christmas holiday. So that, and then another Theremin, because you cannot do just one Theremin documentary. So yes, it's the sequel.
Okay.
Theremin in Motion.
Gotcha.
And then a couple, scripts. I wish I could take Ritalin and just focus.
I know.
You can't.
I'm like writing a play, doing a script, but
I know people can visit 14pews.org
yes.
To find out about that, but where can people find out about your filmmaking? Is there a different website for that? Or
we have a website, Cassandra.com, which they can go to.
Is that right? Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And, I have a Vimeo page, Vimeo Cassandra.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's
Gotcha.
First name, it's pretty easy.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And Brian, you have a website, brianhuberman.com.
I do, yeah.
So tell us what's going on with Rice. And you did the documentary a couple weeks ago about Lou Perryman, the Texas actor, but tell us what's going on with
the Beset by Demons, the Lou Perryman story. Actually, that's been in the works for a while. And what we screened the other day online was something that we've had for a bit, but I don't know, we've kind of been a bit lackadaisical about
Yeah.
showing
talking
it. And
take a long time.
but it sounds, I was listening to Cassandra talk about losing a subject. Lou Perryman was a kind of a wild man, kind of connected to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, some of them. He actually had a small part in Chainsaw 2. Well, not such a small part. He had a part in Chainsaw 2. And he did all kinds of things in his life, a real raconteur, kind of a wild man. He ran drugs and money across the country, went to prison, just a regular guy. And we started filming him around 2005, I guess. And he's the kind of guy you would just follow, an ideal subject for an observational filmmaker, which I really am. I just love to just dance with life, just sort of lock on to some poor soul and just sort of hang out with them and allow the story, as it were, just to unfold. And he was the kind of subject that you could really work well with in that sort of filmmaking setting. And it was great. He was based in Austin. We'd go to various places like he liked to go to the cemeteries and talk about the famous people who were buried there, or maybe go to a highway, a restaurant, and embrace chicken fried steaks and kind of expand on the glories of chicken fried steak. And like I said, he had a movie career as well. My partner in the film, it was really his idea, was Kim Hinkle, who of course is the author of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. And so the two of us just sort of saddled up and went traveling with Lou Perryman. It was just tremendous. We got just fun stuff. Just really fun stuff.
Brian?
And then he got murdered.
Yeah.
He got murdered. Some guy off his meds in Austin just went off one day, heading down to South Austin. Later on, he recounted that demons were directing him.
So the version we saw a couple weeks ago, is that nearing the final version, or do you have a finish date for this film? And also, real quick, because we're going to wrap up, are you working on anything else? Or
I'm working on a semi-autobiographical historical film about the surrender of Geronimo.
Okay.
Which was really a film about journeying to locations in Sonora, Mexico, Arizona, and New Mexico, where some of the important events that deal with that part of Geronimo's life took place. And getting to some of them was not so easy.
Well, you can find Brian at brianhuberman.com and keep up with all your work and your information. So thank y'all. I'd like to thank all the filmmakers for joining us on this Zoom Q&A. Thank you so much. It was I think people who still want to watch the short films, they can do that by tomorrow night, by Thursday. So you can still enjoy the films, which is fantastic. So thank you, Houston Cinema Arts, for this opportunity. And of course, as all the filmmakers mentioned already, a big thank you to Southwest Alternate Media Project, SWAMP, as well. So thank you so much. Michael, if you have any last words, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining us, for all the filmmakers, for hopping on the Zoom call and letting us dredge up all of these memories that I'm sure y'all have either repressed or have not wanted to think about for many, many, many years. It's been a joy to have you all here. If you want to continue to follow our events, we are doing another one of these Zoom Q&A calls with Michael Szynski, who is an experimental curator in Houston, with Sky Hapinka and Simon Liu. If you go to Aurora Picture Show's website, they're currently showing a Sky Hapinka short film, and they're doing some amazing programming as well. And you can sign up for that link, and we'll send out another reel starting Sunday. And then just stay tuned for more stuff. We'll have another program the following week. So thank you all again. Thank you, Alfred, so much for curating and hosting this. It's been great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.